Right now, as you see this, you probably hear a voice in your head speaking these words. That voice is your internal monologue. It narrates your thoughts, plans your day, and talks to you constantly. But here's something that will surprise you. Not everyone has this voice. Some people think in pure concepts, images, or feelings without any words at all. When this fact went viral on social media, people were shocked. Those with internal voices couldn't imagine thinking without words. Those without internal voices couldn't believe others had a constant narrator in their heads. Today, we're going to explore why some brains talk to themselves and others don't, and what this reveals about how human minds actually work. Let me start with what an internal monologue actually is. It's the voice you hear when you think in words. When you read, that voice speaks the text. When you plan what to say, that voice rehearses it. When you remember conversations, that voice replays them. It feels like a constant stream of verbal thought. Most people assume everyone thinks this way, but research shows that only about 50 to 70% of people have a strong internal monologue. The rest think differently. Some have occasional inner speech, but not constant. Others have none at all. People without internal monologues describe their thinking as conceptual. They know what they want to say, but the words only appear when they speak. They think in abstract ideas, visual images, or pure understanding without verbal translation. Their thoughts are direct and non-linguistic. When people first learn about this difference, both groups struggle to understand the other. People with internal voices ask, "How do you think without words?" People without internal voices ask, "Don't you get tired of that voice talking constantly?" Neither way is better or worse. They're just different modes of thinking, but understanding the difference reveals something profound about consciousness and how we experience our own minds. Let me explain what causes this variation. It starts with how your brain processes language and thought. Language and thinking are not the same thing. You can think without language. Babies think before they learn to speak. Animals think without human language. Ancient humans thought before complex language evolved. Language is a tool for expressing and organizing thoughts, but it's not the same as thought itself. Some people's brains automatically translate thoughts into language. Others don't. The thoughts are the same. The way they're experienced is different. Brain imaging studies showed differences between people with and without internal monologues. When people with strong internal speech think, their language areas light up, specifically Broca's area, which controls speech production. They're essentially talking to themselves at the neural level. People without internal monologues show less activation in language areas during thinking. Their thoughts engage visual, spatial, and conceptual processing areas instead. They're thinking through different neural pathways. This difference might be partly genetic. Some people's brains are wired to verbalize thoughts automatically. Others aren't. But environment plays a role too. How you were taught to think as a child influences your internal experience. Children who are taught to think out loud or verbalize their problem solving develop stronger internal monologues. Children who are not taught this way might develop more visual or conceptual thinking styles. Cultural factors matter too. Some cultures emphasize verbal reasoning. Others emphasize holistic or intuitive thinking. The difference affects how people process information. People with internal monologues often think in linear sequences. The voice speaks one word at a time, creating a step-by-step thought process. This can be useful for verbal tasks, planning, and logical reasoning. People without internal monologues often think more holistically. They grasp concepts all at once, without breaking them into words. This can be faster for certain types of thinking, like visual problem solving or intuitive understanding. Here's an example. If I ask you to navigate to your kitchen, what happens? People with internal monologues might think, turn left, go down the hall, turn right into the kitchen. People without might just know the path without verbal description. The knowledge is direct. Or consider reading. People with strong internal monologues read by hearing every word. They can't easily speed read because the voice takes time. People without internal monologues can process text faster because they're extracting meaning without verbalization. But internal monologue affects more than just information processing. It affects self-awareness and sense of self. The narrative voice creates a story of who you are. It comments on your experiences. It evaluates your actions. It creates a running commentary that feels like you. People without this voice have a different relationship with self. They don't have constant self-narration. Their sense of self might be more experiential, less story-based. This doesn't mean they lack self-awareness. They're aware of themselves in a different way. Some researchers think internal monologue is connected to working memory. Working memory is your mental workspace. It holds information while you use it. Verbal working memory uses an inner voice to rehearse information. People with strong internal monologues might have stronger verbal working memory. Visual spatial working memory uses mental images instead of words. People without internal monologues might rely more on this. They might be better at tasks requiring spatial reasoning or visual memory. The difference also affects emotional processing. People with internal monologues often use their inner voice to regulate emotions. They talk themselves through difficult situations. They rationalize and explain feelings to themselves verbally. People without internal monologues process emotions more directly. They feel without narrating the feeling. This might make emotions more immediate and less mediated by verbal interpretation. Neither is healthier. They're just different ways of experiencing emotion. Interestingly, internal monologue varies in the same person. Stress, fatigue, and mental state affect it. When you're tired, your internal monologue might quiet down. When you're anxious, it might become louder and more insistent. Some mental health conditions, like anxiety and depression, involve excessive internal monologue that becomes critical or repetitive. Meditation practices often aim to quiet internal monologue. The goal is to experience thought without verbal mediation. People with strong internal voices find this difficult. People without might naturally exist in a state that meditators work years to achieve. But not having an internal monologue doesn't mean you can't use inner speech. People without constant internal monologue can still talk to themselves when needed. They just don't do it automatically. It's like the difference between breathing automatically and breathing deliberately. Both groups can do both, but the default is different. Language learning shows this difference clearly. People with internal monologues practice languages in their heads. They rehearse phrases and construct sentences verbally before speaking. People without internal monologues might practice differently, using more immersive or conceptual methods. Mathematical thinking also differs. Some people solve math problems by talking through steps verbally. Others visualize numbers and relationships without words. Neither method is superior. Different problems might favor different thinking styles. Creative thinking is particularly interesting. Some writers hear their characters speaking. Their internal monologue generates dialogue and narrative. Other writers think in scenes, images, or concepts that get translated into words during writing. Both produce good writing, but through different cognitive processes. Here's something fascinating. Your thinking style might affect how you experience time. People with strong internal monologues might experience time more linearly because thoughts come in sequence. People without might experience time more holistically, with past, present, and future concepts more integrated. The discovery that people think differently has implications for education. Teaching methods that work well for one thinking style might not work for others. Verbal learners benefit from lectures and reading. Conceptual or visual learners might need different approaches. It also affects communication. When people with different thinking styles talk to each other, misunderstandings can occur. Someone with internal monologue might assume everyone thinks in words and ask, "What were you thinking?" expecting a verbal answer. Someone without might struggle to translate their nonverbal thoughts into words. Neither group is smarter or more capable. Intelligence is not linked to thinking style. You can be brilliant with or without internal monologue. The difference is in processing style, not processing power. Some people have what's called aphantasia, the inability to visualize images mentally. This often correlates with strong internal monologue. If you can't see mental images, your thinking might rely more on words. Conversely, people with very strong visualization might rely less on verbal thought. The variety in human thinking styles is remarkable. Some people think in words, others in images, some in abstract concepts, some in feelings, some in combinations. Human consciousness is not uniform. We each experience our own minds differently. This raises philosophical questions. Is there a true form of thinking? Or are all these styles equally valid ways of being conscious? Does your thinking style affect who you are as a person? These questions don't have clear answers. What we know is that awareness of these differences can improve understanding. If you have an internal monologue, remember that others don't and might need different communication styles. If you don't have one, remember that others do and might process information more slowly because they're verbalizing it. The existence of different thinking styles also challenges assumptions about consciousness. We often assume everyone's inner life is like ours, but it's not. Consciousness varies. What it feels like to be you is different from what it feels like to be someone else, even at this basic level of inner experience. This has practical implications. If you struggle with racing thoughts or anxiety-driven internal monologue, knowing that others don't have this can be eye-opening. Your experience is not universal, and there are techniques to quiet internal speech when it becomes problematic. Conversely, if you don't have internal monologue and feel like you're missing something others have, you're not. Your way of thinking is valid and functional. You're not broken or deficient. You just think differently. The human brain is flexible. You can develop internal speech if you don't have it by practicing verbal thinking deliberately. You can quiet internal speech if it's too loud through meditation and mindfulness. Your default thinking style is not fixed forever. Understanding your own thinking style can help you work with your strengths. If you think verbally, use written notes and verbal rehearsal. If you think visually, use diagrams and mental imagery. If you think conceptually, trust your intuitive understanding and find ways to express it clearly when needed. The fact that this difference was so surprising to people when it went viral shows how little we understand about basic human experience. We assume everyone is like us. We project our inner experience onto others, but minds vary more than we realize. Your internal experience is your reality, but it's not the only reality. Other people experience consciousness differently. They're not wrong. They're not broken. They're just different. And that difference is part of the remarkable diversity of human minds. So whether you have a constant voice narrating your thoughts or you think in silent concepts and images, you're experiencing one valid form of human consciousness. Neither is the correct way. They're both real. They're both functional. They're both human. If this exploration of how differently people experience their own minds made you think about your own thinking, hit that like button and subscribe. We're investigating the varieties of human consciousness and how what seems universal is actually diverse. Ring the notification bell so you don't miss our next examination of how human minds differ in unexpected ways. Drop a comment telling us, do you have an internal monologue? If so, is it constant or occasional? If not, how do you experience your thoughts? Your answer might surprise someone who thinks completely differently than you do.